Now to pour this, there's two ways you could do this. You could put this into a second bottle with a lid and you really have a nice controlled movement, or you could use your craft stick, which also offers you a nice controlled movement in pouring, or you could pour right into it. And for this, we're going to use our craft stick to kind of get everything in there and manipulate it really well. And like I said, this is our first layer, so we don't need a thick layer, we just need a little bit. And I'm just going to take it on the craft stick and drizzle it in. And I like to move this little bit around, manipulating it to the edges. And you can see it moves on its own. It's a self-leveling resin. And what that means is it will actually go and fill in all the cracks on its own. So you don't have to worry about moving it about or popping bubbles. You never want to put heat on this. This resin was developed to not be cured with heat. It needs to be air dried or air cured. So don't take your lighter or heat gun to dry this because it would actually create a very strong film on top, much like when you make pudding, and it would ruin your resin. We need just a wee bit more in this. And if you find you walk away for a little bit, let's say 15-20 minutes, and oh, I still see a little bit of a bubble, you could take a straight pin and just pop that, but no heat. So this one has its first layer. And this is this is actually going to have a transparency layer put in during the next process. So this is good to go. And then our raised front bezel is going to get the same little layer. And this one I just want to show you if I was to pour, how I would pour it, since we used the craft stick on the first one. And again, I'm going to just move this a little bit. And that tape is acting as the back of our bezel. And we just kind of move it around until it reaches all of the edges. And we're going to let this set aside for a second while I do our nested bezel. And the only difference between this and the open back is there's a back on it. So we don't need to make sure we have a flat back surface because it already has one. So because I have it nested, I want to manipulate the resin and be in control with it. So I'm going to just take my craft stick and spoon it in. And the primary reason is I really want to make sure I'm filling both those rhinestone gaps as well as that typewriter key. And you're just kind of spooning it in and letting it move. And the big key to this is always let everything settle a little bit before you pour more, because you may think, oh, this isn't filling, but it's still taking its time to move to all the edges. And I like a little bit on top of the typewriter key because it domes. It will give it a little more magnification. And if you find that you've poured and you've let this completely cure, and I let mine cure for 24 hours. This will be dry to the touch in 6 hours. However, I like to just kind of let it sit a little bit longer because I live in the climate I do. But if you live in a really warm climate or very extreme heat, then you would be fine in 6 hours and you could work with this no problem. And when I say dry, I mean dried on top and inside. It takes 3 days to completely cure, which just means all the fibers have turned into almost a glass-like substance. So this one is poured as well. So now what I'm going to do is let these sit for a couple hours before I go into working with my next layer. So in the next chapter, we're going to pour our second layer as well as clean up any spills we may have had on the backs of our bezels.